first time Jason heard the footsteps, he was alone in the old mansion. The sound echoed through the hollow hallway's soft, deliberate steps that did not belong to him. At first, he thought it was the wooden floors settling, but as the nights passed, the footsteps became clearer, closer. The house had been abandoned for years, standing like a skeletal relic on the outskirts of town. Jason had inherited it from an uncle he barely remembered, an eccentric recluse who had vanished under strange circumstances. The locals refused to come near it, whispering tales of shadows moving past the broken windows, of eerie laughter on stormy nights. Jason, a skeptic, dismissed it all as superstitions. But now, he wasn't so sure. One night, as he lay in bed, the sound returned steady, measured steps pacing outside his door. His breath caught in his throat. He reached for his phone, but his fingers trembled too much to dial. The steps stopped abruptly. The silence was suffocating. Then, in the darkness, a whisper crawled through the air. "Jason." The voice was hollow, distant, and yet impossibly near. Heart pounding, Jason sprang from his bed and swung the door open. The hallway was empty. The shadows stretched unnaturally, but there was no one there. He turned on every light in the house, but no matter how brightly the bulbs burned, the shadows in the corners remained. Determined to solve the mystery, Jason began to investigate the house's history. In the town library, he unearthed disturbing newspaper clippings. His uncle, Richard Graves, had vanished without a trace inside the house. But what sent chills racing down Jason's spine was the mention of others before him, tenants and caretakers who had all heard the same footsteps, right before they too disappeared. Jason was no longer skeptical. Something was in that house, something watching him, following him. He decided to set up cameras and voice recorders, hoping to capture proof of the haunting. That night, as the rain lashed against the windows, he sat in the dim glow of his laptop, monitoring the feeds. At exactly 3:13 a.m., a new sound joined the footsteps, a dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. His camera feed flickered. For a brief moment, Jason saw something in outline in the darkness. A figure, impossibly thin, with hollow eyes and gnarled fingers, standing at the end of the hallway. It was watching him. Then, the screen went black. A chill gripped his spine. He spun around, heart hammering. The footsteps were inside his room now, right behind him. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. The whisper returned, curling around his ear. "You hear me now?" The darkness swallowed him whole. Jason woke up gasping, his body drenched in sweat. His room was exactly as he had left it, yet an unnatural chill clung to the air. He reached for his laptop, heart pounding. The files were gone. Every recording, every camera, feed erased. A deep sense of dread settled in his chest. He had to leave. He had to get out of that house. He grabbed his keys and phone, bolting for the front door. But the moment his fingers touched the handle, the entire house groaned as if awakening. The walls shuddered, the floorboards twisted beneath his feet, and then the footsteps returned. Only this time, they were running. Jason turned just in time to see something rushing toward him, a blur of darkness with gleaming eyes. He fell back, scrambling away, but the entity didn't attack. Instead, it stopped inches from him. The air between them crackled with an unnatural energy. Then, it whispered, "You belong here now." The lights flickered violently. The air grew thick, pressing against his chest. Jason struggled to breathe as an unseen force dragged him backward, deeper into the house. He clawed at the floor, screaming, but the darkness was stronger. The last thing he saw was the front door swinging open, offering an escape he would never reach. And then, the house devoured him. Jason awoke in darkness. Not in his room, not anywhere familiar. The air was thick, suffocating, and the silence around him was broken only by a slow, rhythmic sound, the cursed footsteps. He stood on an endless corridor, stretching into an abyss. The walls were lined with doors, each one whispering, creaking, as if calling out. He turned, trying to find a way out, But the hallway shifted, bending unnaturally. The floor beneath his feet pulsed, as if alive. Shadows began to emerge from the doors. Twisted figures, hollow-eyed and wretched, each one bearing the same haunted expression, lost souls trapped within the house. They moved toward him, whispering his name over and over. Jason backed away, but there was nowhere to run. Then, he saw it. At the far end of the corridor, a mirror stood, cracked and old, reflecting something that was not his own reflection. Instead, his Uncle Richard stared back at him, his eyes wide with terror. His lips moved, forming silent words. "You were never meant to leave." Jason felt cold hands gripping his shoulders. He tried to scream, but the shadows dragged him back, pulling him through the floor as the footsteps echoed louder, surrounding him. The cursed footsteps would never stop, because now they belonged to him.